Life's Moments. 24th Story. Ch1, Prelude. Sitting in a mahogany wooden office, Arthur Wenachowski's youthful hazel and gray-toned eyes scanned the place, wondering what person held such power. He wondered what kind of person took authority within this office, with its dark, heavy black curtains nearly encasing the room in nothingness. Yet a sliver of sunlight was barely allowed in, giving some hope that the small, rounded cactus was getting enough sun, which took its favorite place on the walnut-based windowsill. Sudden sharp quick yelps and whines took over the still silence in the office, causing Arthur to turn to face the giver of such sounds. The sounds emitted themselves from within the body of a restless woman named Thalia Taylor. She bounded to and forth, hands and arms dancing like tree branches during a rushing storm, legs taking her from the closed-off window and to the office door. The whines and yelps stopped, but continued in bursts of powerful joy and unwillingness to fully bring to a close. For most, those sounds would be off-putting, strange even. But it was an everyday normal for Thalia. Those sounds brought joy, comfort in knowing she would be safe. They were a form of communication, as physical words did not come easy to her. Arthur understood these sounds as a warning that Thalia was becoming unsettled with having to wait to leave the office. Holding out his palm to Thalia as a stopping point, Arthur hoped it would bring her a sense of calm. "We're leaving soon, love," Arthur reassured gently. Pausing, Thalia lightly tapped his palm in an unsure manner, then the gesture quickened in a clapping expression, expressing trust in Arthur's words. After this nurturing moment, Thalia went back to skipping and humming with newfound joy before suddenly being interrupted by the office door opening and closing. Familiar heels clicked across the wood-like linoleum floor to the chestnut-toned Wexford desk. They stopped as the individual who wore them sat in the dean's office chair that matched the color of the desk. Arthur found himself face to face with Thalia Wellington, otherwise known as the Director of Tender Care. Tender Care was a residential facility that placed disabled adults in care that their earlier caregivers could not properly give them. The care facility took in late teens to adults up to middle age. When the adults got to their mid-40s, they would be transferred to an assisted living facility that took in middle-aged adults up to senior age. Thalia was part of the population who were sent to tender care around their late teens. Thalia's childhood wasn't nice, and her aunt couldn't handle Thalia's sudden aggressive meltdowns, and she received little support until she reached out to tender care staff. They let Thalia's aunt know of the options available, and Thalia was sent to live at tender care for more substantial care. Arthur himself had only been a volunteer for tender care a year after Thalia arrived. Both met each other and developed a likely friendship, which became a blossoming romantic relationship. Although Arthur's was not completely sure how to support someone like Thalia, he knew he could do so based on his own life experiences. Growing up, Arthur helped disabled students briefly throughout school who had similar supports to Thalia, but he had no direct responsibility with caring for a disabled person. Becoming slightly uncomfortable with the silence that brewed in the office, Arthur cleared his throat. "Is everything all right, Director Wellington?" Director Wellington gave a slight raised brow, silencing Arthur before he could continue. "Yes. I'm just wondering if you understand the implications of providing long-term care to someone of Thalia's condition. Providing such care means you may have to put yourself last and put Thalia's needs first. Do you understand such implications?" "I believe I do. Thalia means a lot to me, and I want her to live the life she wants. I understand it means that I may have to sacrifice, but I can handle it," Arthur began, a nervous twinge in his voice threatening to betray his composure. Director Wellington gave a solemn look at Arthur, her features kind. Having helped multiple families, she was well aware of situations where family members who couldn't handle their disabled loved ones being back at home and sadly send them back to the facility. The ones sent back would linger in the common room, calling out to family members who weren't around anymore in hopes of going back home, with little to no chance of actually leaving. Director Wellington wanted to ensure this wasn't the case with Thalia and Arthur. With some resolve, Director Wellington nodded at the couple and began signing a formal document of release. "Well, I hope you and Thalia enjoy life together and may things work out for you both." Thank you. We plan to do just that. Arthur reassured, smiling with relief. Sensing it was time to head home, Thalia returned to where Arthur was seated after exploring the bookshelf towards the back of the office, took hold of his hand and gently tugged. Noticing, Director Wellington smiled warmly. Seems like someone is eager to head home. I'll get these copied and you can be on your way, Director Wellington declared. She collected the papers as she stood and stuck out her hand for a handshake. Arthur returned the gesture and thanked the director once more. Still holding onto Thalia's hand with his right hand, Arthur stood from his seat and followed Director Wellington out of the office. Let's head home, dear, he replied, leading Thalia out of the office and into the main room where they waited to be released from tender care and to the home where they can start their lives together. That was 2 years ago, and the two had lived together and had gotten used to each other's habits, good or otherwise. They lived in a mini mansion-style home which was 2 stories and had elegant marble counters and light coffee-toned wooden floors. A staircase sat near the back of the home, allowing its owners and guests to travel to the second floor where the primary bedroom, primary bathroom, and guest bedroom took place. The primary bedroom was on the far left of the second floor, while the bathroom was in the middle and the guest bedroom resided on the far right. Both Arthur and Thalia spent most of their time between upstairs and downstairs, but favored the first floor because they enjoyed their connected kitchen and living room. A set of 3 wooden steps led to the living room from the kitchen, where a white leather couch sat with medium wood-based side tables on either side. A 60-inch flat-screen television looked over the entire living room, mounted to the wall with a small classroom-style clock resting above it. Overall, the house was home. It was calm. Until it wasn't. The day was a warm September Thursday morning in central downtown Milwaukee, and Arthur found himself in a small cafe, amongst others, trying to find some solitude and peace from the loud city. He had joined his older sister, Thalia Wenachowski, for an outing to catch up. Theresa was alone, which was rare as she was usually in tow with her sons and ex-husband, Jamie Chambers. Hope the trip to the bathroom wasn't too much for you, Theresa replied with a slight smirk. Trying but failing to, Arthur discreetly dried his hands on his pants. Well, when you run out of paper towels, it's not a pleasant trip. Arthur half laughed. He took his seat next to his wife, whom was expressing her joy though happy, low-pitched hums and by swaying her head. Watching with a look of disgust, Theresa raised her eyebrows critically. Why do you allow her to do that? She asked. Arthur shrugged, taking a moment to sip his coffee. Thalia calmed down a bit before clapping lightly and rocking slightly. Theresa watched on, shaking her head discreetly. I don't think that she's harming anyone, Arthur declared, shrugging nonchalantly. It's gonna make her stand out. Society already doesn't accept people like her, Theresa replied, giving Arthur a tired expression. Not wanting to carry on with the issue at hand, Theresa set to ignore Thalia's excitement and focused on Arthur instead. Wiping her hands on a paper towel, she faced Arthur with a serious look. I heard that there's been some more robberies happening a bit close to home. You and the chief gonna sort that out? Caught off guard by the question, Arthur coughed in between a bite of food, causing him to choke slightly before swallowing deeply. Effortlessly clearing his throat, he faced his sister. The chief and I aren't the only ones handling cases like that. We deal with homicides mainly. Robberies, sure. But we hand those cases to the detectives on the ground floor. Raising an eyebrow at her brother's response, Theresa placed her coffee on the table before gathering her belongings. Well, I shouldn't keep you. I gotta get home before the boys get there first. You know how they can get when I'm not there. That's very true, Arthur chuckled, getting up himself. Once Theresa was gone, Arthur and Thalia then set their sights on returning home to relax. Ch2, New Beginnings. With his hand resting under his scruffy chin, Arthur found himself lost in thought as he sat in the driver's seat of his tan Chevy Tahoe truck. He and one of his nephews, 10-year-old Theodore Wenachowski-Chambers, were awaiting the arrival of Theresa. Her youngest son, 6-year-old Thane, sat in the back seat beside his brother, asleep in his car seat. Theresa was inside Wisconsin Children's Pediatrics for a clinical assessment for Thane. As the two waited, Arthur suddenly noticed 2 people walking in the same direction as he was parked in. One was a heavy-set man whom walked with a skip alongside an elderly woman who appeared to be the man's mother or other relative. The man skipped along, a tablet with a red hardshell case in one hand and a squishy-like toy in the other. With sudden curiosity, Arthur sat up a little straighter and waved to the pair cheerfully. Hello there. How are you? Surprised, The elderly woman stopped walking and turned to Arthur and gave a wide smile. "Hello. How you doing?" the woman shouted back. The young man had stopped and kept his focus on the ground, seeming to be nervous to wave back. Arthur leaned back in his seat and sighed warmly. "Isn't it always nice to meet new people?" he stated mostly to himself. After a few moments, Theodore piped up from behind the back seat. "Look at the clouds, Mommy," he stated, his voice monotone in nature. Arthur, understanding that the line was one Theodore used to get people to pay attention to him, nodded and glanced back at him. "Yes, Theo. Where's Mommy?" Before Arthur could respond, he saw his sister approaching the truck with a dismayed expression across her face. Her steps were hurried yet timid, which showed she wasn't pleased with whatever occurred in the office of the Children's Center. Getting in, Teresa huffed a sigh which seemed to remove of the tension she was feeling. With an raised eyebrow, Arthur looked at her with a hint of worry in his eyes. "Something the matter?" Unable to hide the overwhelm of emotions threatening to show, tears began to trickle down Teresa's face as sobs escaped her. Arthur sat beside her uncomfortably, unsure of how to comfort his sister. After a few moments, Teresa took a deep, shuddering breath as she leaned back in her seat and wiping her eyes. "The doctor said that Thane has severe autism. Said he won't be able to talk or do things like regular kids. That because he isn't speaking and doesn't express himself like other kids that he will need significant care for the rest of his life," Teresa finally stated. Arthur gave a slow, understanding nod to this information and kept his gaze on the empty road ahead of him. He then turned to Teresa with a serious expression. "Do you think he will be that way forever? Theo is showing progress. I'm sure Thane will too." Teresa sniffed loudly before nodding quickly. "I know he may not always be the way he is as a kid, but I worry so much, Arthur. I worry about his and Theodore's futures. I worry if they'll ever experience romantic feelings for someone. I worry if they'll ever make friends. I just want them to have the life like other kids have. You know, Theo's never said I love you to me? That hurts me. As a mother, that hurts," she sniffled, her eyes getting misty yet again. Mommy sat again. Theodore suddenly said. He faced the window as he said this. This got Teresa to smile as she fought to end the tears still falling down her cheeks. She let a soft laugh before responding. "Yes, I am. But you and your brother always make my day. Thank you, Theo." A warm smile gave way on Arthur's face as he turned the engine on to start heading home. "Everyone feeling better now?" Arthur asked, pulling away from the center. "Yeah, I needed that." Teresa sighed. As he drove, Arthur glanced over at his sister and gave her a pat on the knee. "It's gonna be okay, Teresa. I'm here for you," he replied gently. With newfound calmness, Teresa watched the town become blurs as she kept faith that her brother and sons will keep her grounded in the hard times. She hoped that the very small glimmer of hope would keep her going. After dropping off Teresa and her sons, Arthur decided to head home to his own family. Knowing how Thalia could become if he didn't return home after a certain time, Arthur knew he couldn't keep her waiting long. He parked the truck outside their home before entering the key in the door and heading inside. Once inside, Arthur found Thalia sitting on their couch, writing in a notebook with her communication tablet beside her. Giving a soft smile, Arthur went over to sit beside her. "How was your day?" Thalia gave no response, which Arthur understood to be a moment where she needed to process her thoughts. He waited for a moment until he figured he wouldn't get a response right away. Taking in the silence, Arthur sat back inside. "We might have another person in the family similar to you," Arthur stated fondly. Thalia, not looking at Arthur, raised her eyebrows, hinting at the fact that she could have another person in the family like herself. She reached for her tablet and pressed picture icons that said a word one at a time. Each time icon was selected, a robotic childlike voice emitted from the tablet's tinny speakers. "Like me? Good." Arthur smiled and nodded proudly at this. Thalia's usage of the alternative communication tablet she got a year ago through a disability technology company was new and slow. Seeing her pick up on using the device with no assistance the first time made his chest swell with pride. Reaching for the TV remote on the coffee table, Arthur proceeded to flick through a select movie channels before deciding on watching Happy Feet with his wife. It was Thalia's second favorite movie to watch because of the various music tracks and dancing penguins. At the excitement of watching Happy Feet a third time in that week, Thalia jumped up with a loud, somewhat happy groan and bounded to the refrigerator to get a juice box before returning back to her seat. The two sat on the couch watching the rerun movie for a while before they headed to bed, each lost in their own dreams. CH3, New Friend. A few weeks later, the Milwaukee Police Headquarters buzzed with activity as a fresh new face entered the front lobby. He had a soft, baby-like face that seemed to tell everyone that snuck a glance what age he was as he approached the front desk. The man was short for his age, standing at around 5 feet 3 inches, and this caused him some embarrassment when walking around the city. His hair, a Hershey chocolate brown, was swept back and parted to the left as he rubbed his barely visible chin hairs with slight nervousness. The front desk lady looked at him with a raised eyebrow, her ocean-colored eyes studying the young man with bored curiosity. "Are you lost, sir?" "And no. Just looking for Chief Hassan. He said I should see him in his office or in the main office for my first case." He leaned against the counter as a way to show an air of confidence as his nervousness threatened to take over. Tilting her head forward in annoyance, the receptionist gave the man a look. "It's down the hall straight ahead, Mr. Thomas Devons. Or Officer Devons," Thomas said quickly. "Good luck, Thomas Devons." "Not that you would need it," the receptionist stated, typing on her keyboard. Stepping away from the desk and following the lady's direction, Thomas could see that the place was busier than usual. He then noticed Arthur standing at a large evidence whiteboard with various mugshots and written descriptions of victims and possible suspects plastered onto it. For anyone meeting Arthur for the first time, most would feel intimidated. His darkened, tawny skin glowed whenever light met it, giving it a shiny complexion. Arthur's wide, bulky figure was what people saw first. Then the eyes. Arthur's light-toned hazel and gray eyes could bore into anyone, especially if he wasn't in the right mood. Yet they could show the deepest kindness when the light hit them in the right spots. Hair wasn't an issue for people when they saw Arthur as it was barely visible on his face. A stubble of a beard with the same hair color couldn't be seen from a distance unless someone were up close to him, and Arthur wasn't the type to allow such intimacy. His jet black and frizzled quiff-cut hair gave a semi-gentle vibe to the 6 feet 1 inch bulky authoritative man, showing the rare side of kindness to be shown. Knowing a little about Arthur being the main detective to go to, Thomas hurriedly approached Arthur as he was finishing his notes on the evidence board for the morning. "Arthur Wenachowski?" Thomas began. Giving an inquisitive look at Thomas, Arthur wondered who this kid was, speaking to him in such a tone. He faced Thomas with the sternness of a father before chastising a young child. "Firstly, I don't let anyone call me by my full name, let alone in public. Secondly, it's Lieutenant Wenachowski to you, rookie. Thirdly, I haven't even had my coffee yet, so you're already 4 points below my expectations. So, let's start again with the proper introductions, yeah," Arthur reprimanded sharply. "Calm down there, sir. Just wanted to introduce myself. Is that such a bad thing?" Thomas quickly stated, a smug smirk dancing across his face. "Excuse me?" Arthur threateningly questioned, his voice a low whisper. He stepped closer to Thomas, his face stormy. "You act all high and mighty. That's not a good look. You best watch who you're toying with, rookie. I'm not one to play around with people who undermine my authority," Arthur hissed. His once calm eyes narrowed, showing challenged anger. All right. Clearly I stepped on someone's toes. My bad." Thomas backed down, his palms in a surrender position. Turning away while shaking his head annoyingly, Arthur rolled his eyes as he added a note to the evidence board before capping the marker and walking over to his own desk. He typed up a short report and submitted it to the forensics head directory. After this, he went over to the newbie's desk and loomed over him. Looking up at Arthur, Thomas sat at his desk, his hands cadoed behind his head as his feet rested lazily on his desk's wooden surface. "What?" "I know you're my new partner, Officer Devons. The chief already told me. Also, this ain't your home. Your feet stay on the floor," Arthur demanded. Not wanting to piss Arthur off any more than he did, Thomas quickly followed him to an adjacent conference room that faced the main lobby of the area where officers and detectives worked. Arthur then thrusted a folder onto the table before Thomas as he took a seat. Arthur stood at the front of the oval table and turned on a large computer monitor, which displayed a presentation of the current case they were assigned to. "This is Mallory Victor. She was found dead in her apartment last Tuesday under suspicious circumstances. Her husband was on vacation during this time and flew back to Milwaukee last night. Given that she was stabbed 15 times, we're ruling it a homicide. We're also labeling the murder as one done with passion and hate. Are there other details you see that may have been missed?" Arthur explained, his voice sharp and quick. Thomas glanced at what was presented to him and studied the victim's wounds, time of death, among other factors. Well, the murderer could be someone she knew, but she didn't have many friends, and her only living relative is an estranged uncle residing in California. I would assume that she got to know someone native to Milwaukee and that person ended her life, Thomas concluded. Nodding slightly, Arthur switched the presentation slides to one that showed 3 questions. What did the killer want from Mallory? How did she ended up being the target? Where do we go from here? Reading the questions mostly to himself, Thomas ripped a piece of paper from a nearby notebook and wrote them down. Have we done a canvass around her neighborhood? Where did she work? We started a canvass, but reached a dead end. She had a part-time job as a teacher's assistant, but left due to job cuts. She was getting ready to apply to another job before her death, Arthur informed. Standing, Thomas folded his notes and put them in his pocket and taking his folder to research the place where Mallory previously worked. As Arthur watched him, a hint of wonder entered his mind. Hopefully this kid does better than my previous partner, Arthur thought to himself as he shut down the monitor and headed to the chief's office. Upon opening the office door, Arthur entered the office. The chief looked tired. Not tired as in needing rest, but tired as in exhausted. His winter, gray almond-shaped eyes seemed to express what his body was feeling. Wrinkles framed his face as withered gray hairs dotted his chin and jawline. The smile that was on Arthur's face dropped as he took in the sight of the chief. Chief Hassan? Are you okay? Arthur questioned. Concern spiked in his voice, changing his once relaxed tone. He sat in the mahogany-toned chair before the chief, his eyes focusing on his outer appearance. The chief waved off his worries as he watched Arthur with a fatherly gaze. You remind me so much of my younger self, Arthur. How's your new partner, by the way? He's okay for now. Hopefully, he lasts longer than my old partner. As he said this, Arthur felt his phone buzz in his pocket as he went to retrieve it. The message caused Arthur to stop in his tracks as he read it. Mr. Wenachowski, your presence is required at tender care. Thalia seems to be having a rough day as she unfortunately attacked a care support staff and destroyed classroom furniture. She's currently resting in one of our safe rooms. Please come with haste. Noticing the change in his demeanor, Chief Hassan raised a curious yet worried eyebrow. Everything okay, Wenachowski? No. No, it isn't. Thalia had an episode at tender care and the support staff need me to come get her, Arthur breathlessly stated as he hurried to leave. His mouth suddenly dry, he rushed out of the office, giving the chief a brief glance. Hope everything gets better, Chief Hassan replied, watching his mentee leave the office. Waiting a beat, Chief Hassan wordlessly bent down slowly to the very last drawer of his desk and removed a worn gold metal key from under his vest. Upon opening it, his gaze fell to medical papers that seemed to scream at him as he picked them up. Tears began to form in his exhausted eyes as he read the words to himself again. Stage 3 meningioma cancer. Patient requires active monitoring, close care, and radiation therapy. The spread of the cancer is in a moderate rate, suggesting it could become aggressive if it hasn't already. Exhaling deeply, Chief Hassan took the papers and stacked them to ensure they were together before folding them and placing them into a beige envelope. Licking the envelope adhesive, Chief Hassan closed it and began writing on the front of it. To Arthur. P.S. I've always thought of you as the son I've never had. Thank you. With this last message, Chief Hassan placed the envelope into an armoire that rested against the wall on the right side of his desk. Closing the double doors and locking them, Chief Hassan took his seat and began writing a letter. Arthur, my dear son. I've watched you grow from a nervous boy who didn't know what in records-keeping system was to now running both the missing and homicide lead units. Saying I'm proud wouldn't even scratch the surface of how my heart soars for your accomplishments here at MPD. Seeing your love for your wife Thalia only highlights how much you care for others. I may not understand all your life experiences, but I see the way you honor others before you. Sometimes, son, we need to take care of ourselves. That may be taking a walk alone or even bird watching for heck's sake. But don't wait until the end to finally do something. Trust me, I've done that enough to know now it may be too little, too late. Trust others for once. I know you got hurt in your life, but don't mistake gratitude for weakness. Asking for help isn't weak. It allows others to care for you the way you care for others. I have one wish for you. Take time for yourself. Do it before it becomes too late to do it. I love you, Arthur Wenachowski. Sincerely, Chief Samuel Hassan. Sighing deeply, Chief Hassan folded the letter once the long way before sticking it under a mountain of papers in his desk drawer before him. He hoped Arthur would find it, but another part hoped he didn't as a way to save him from what was to come. Ch4. Fragile emotions. Unsure what he would find, Arthur hurried up the worn concrete steps of the tender care center and into the entrance of the front lobby. A facility nurse noticed Arthur and quickly approached him, deep concern etched onto her face. "Mr. Wenachowski, thank goodness you're here. Thalia's waiting in the room down the hall." "Thanks," Arthur quickly stated, patting the nurse on the shoulder before rushing down the hall to the room where Thalia was. When he entered the room, disarray and destruction met Arthur's shocked expression. The doorway opened to a few school desks flipped upside down with papers scattered about the floor while plants from the nearby windows were knocked down, dirt and roots covering the cabinets and rugs. On the far wall were classroom bulletin boards with posters, which had been torn down in a way that resembled a bear tearing down a tree with its large, razor-sharp claws. More papers and books were scattered across the room while baskets with various toy items were appended near the doorway. Trying to keep his jaw off the ground, Arthur hastily crossed the room towards where Thalia rested on a blue-worn medium beanbag that was against the wall, her body turned facing the torn classroom posters. Not visible to Arthur, Thalia nervously nodded her thumb. Arthur calmly approached and knelt before her. "What happened? What went wrong?" Arthur softly questioned. His worried eyes watched Thalia with a kindness that matched the exhaustion she must have felt after the ordeal. Yet Thalia remained quiet, soft hums escaping every now and then. Hefting a sharp exhale, Arthur stood and reached out a hand to Thalia. "Let's go. We're going home," Arthur declared, his voice tight with barely controlled restraint. With this, Thalia begrudgingly took his hand as Arthur led her out of the classroom. As he and Thalia left, one of the support staff approached the couple, wringing her hands nervously. "The head dean wants to speak with you, Mr. Wenachowski. She says it's urgent." Not having the bandwidth to deal with potential consequences, Arthur sharply turned to the smaller woman. "Tell her she has my number. She knows she can call me. I'm taking Thalia home." Before the support staffer could stop him, Arthur hustled Thalia to their truck outside and helped her inside. He then threw open the driver's door and got in, slamming the door closed. The only sounds between the two were Thalia's soft, unsettled humming and Arthur's heavy breathing. After a few minutes, Arthur glanced at Thalia, his face gentle. "Let's head home, yeah?" Thalia hummed in agreement, but before Arthur could pull away from Tender Care Center, Arthur's phone rang, and he took it out to answer the call. "Yes." "Hey, Arthur. It's Gwendolyn. I just finished a doctor's appointment. Are you able to come get me?"